So we are beginning the first Mishnah, the first Daf in Yevamos. However, in order to begin this Mishnah, firstly, there's a general question. The Rambam in Pirush HaNayos has a question. Why is Yevamos the first Seder in Noshim? There's Kiddushin. There are other Masechtas. Why is Yevamos chosen as the first one? And the Rambam explains that the mitzvah, which is hechrechi, which is obligatory, which you must do. In other words, Kiddushin you don't must do. Let's say you're married already, you have one wife, and then those days before Chedim D'Rabbeinu Gershom, you could marry a second or a third or a fourth. If you're married already, you have children, you don't have to marry another woman. If you want to, you can, but it's not a must. By Yibum, the mitzvah of Yibum, if it happens, is a must. So that's one of the reasons. That's the reason why he brings that Yevamos goes first. So, as not by way of introduction, in order to explain the mitzvah or to introduce the mitzvah of Yibum, we have to learn a few psukim in Parshas Kiseitze Perek Chof Hey, psukim Hey through Yud, but primarily the first few psukim. The pasuk says Ki yeshvu achim yachdov, and from every few words something else is derived. So Ki yeshvu achim yachdov, if brothers will dwell together. Umeis achad, and one of them pass on. Uvein lo, and he doesn't have any children. Loi si eishes hameis hachutza leish zor. The wife of the deceased should not just go and marry anybody else, a stranger. Rather, Yevama yavai aleho ulakacha loy leisha v'yibum. Yevama means the husband's brother. He's the one who must marry her, take her for a wife. The firstborn, which will be born based on this second marriage, Yokum al Shem Ochiv Hames. In other words, the brother, his name will be remembered. And then the pasuk goes on, and what happens if he doesn't want to marry her? Then there's a whole chalitza process. Chalitza process is the shoe and the spinning and I don't want to take her, etc. That's chalitza. But the first mitzvah, the first option is brought down as yibum, and then there's the other concept as chalitza. Incidentally, nowadays, the general process is chalitza. Yibum is not really an option because there's a day in Gemara known as Abba Shol. Abba Shol says that generally speaking, and we'll learn about it soon, the brother's wife is an erva, a chiyuv kares. Generally speaking, one must never marry the brother's wife. It's an erva. The only heter to do it is yibum. That's the exception. And when it's done in this way, then the isur goes away. Doing this particular mitzvah has to be lishma, has to be for the proper intent. Otherwise, if you have other intentions, you're not really doing this mitzvah, and it's not so pashut. So therefore, nowadays, the common approach to this particular situation would be chalitza. At any rate, I just want to give several introductions, as if I didn't give an introduction yet. We just learned ki yeshvu achim yachtov, if brothers will dwell together. Achim, number one, achim. There's a drasha we learned that achim is min ha'av. The brothers is they have to share a common father, not a common mother. If they don't share a common father, this mitzvah is not applicable. In other words, and actually, then you must not marry her. The isur cannot go off. The only chiyuv and the only obligation of marrying your deceased childless brother's wife is if it's a common brother from a father. Number one. In addition, it says ubein ein loy. and he doesn't have a son. Ein loy is spelled with an aleph. The Gemara also has a drasha, ayin loy. Delve into the matter. See if he has some descendant of some sort. In other words, a child's child, a daughter's daughter, something. If someone is alive, if he has some descendant, even a grandchild or a great-grandchild, then yibum and chalitza is not applicable. There is no chiyuv of any yibum. Point number 2. Point number 3. It says, Ki yeshvu achim yachtov. If brothers will dwell together. It doesn't mean that they're both dwelling together in California or in Nova Scotia. It's not a place. Ki yeshvu achim yachtov does not refer to a place, but rather it's yeshiva achas ba'olam. It means that they have to coexist at the same time. Meaning, if let's say you have Reuven and Shimon, if Reuven was married and he passes away childless, and then his parents have another child, Shimon. But Reuven and Shimon did not coexist at the same time. Shimon was born after Reuven's passing. That's not ki yeshvu achim yachtov. That's not brothers living at the same time, and therefore the obligation of Shimon when he grows up having to be miyabim Reuven's wife does not apply. You want me to do it now or later? Is that a hint?
This one is better. You great.
So now that's so in summation so far, if you have the brother's wife, right, a yibum, generally speaking, it's one of the arayos, and you're chayiv koris to marry her, and even after the brother passes away, there's a chayiv koris. However, there are some exceptions when there's not a chayiv koris, but if those exceptions don't apply, in other words, if the brother leaves a child, or if it's a brother only from the mother, not from the father, or if the brothers did not coexist at the same time, meaning Reuven passed away before Shimon was born, then there is no din of yibum, and the chiyuv of koris and erva still remains. Only where there is yibum al pi Torah can this be matir her. Can she become muteres to the deceased's brother? Another point, it says Yevama Yavoy Aleho Ulekachaloi Isha. Yevama Yavoy Aleha means, in other words, Minat Torah Yavoy Aleha means Yibum is the conjugal act. That's Yibum Minat Torah, and no kiddushin as would take place with a normal husband and wife, with kesef, money, etc., that normally does not apply. Al pi Torah, that would not apply. However, midrabanon, the Chachamim did enact that there is kiddushin beforehand as well, and afterwards, if there is yibum, then he could divorce her with a get. Another point, Isur Yibum, in other words, we said before that Ish Zor, basically it's called Isur Yevama B'Shuk. In other words, she cannot just marry anybody else in the market. I guess the Shuk market, that's maybe where the expression, is your daughter in the market yet? Is your son in the market yet? Is Shidduch market yet? So that could be the connection right there. So this Isur Yevama B'Shuk is specifically if Yibum did not take place. If Yibum did take place and she was divorced, then she may marry anybody else. Or if Yibum didn't take place, or Chalitza did take place, then she's Muteres L'Shuk, she could marry anybody. I mean, as long as they're back on the market, as they say. Then another point, what happens if you have many wives? The deceased brother had many wives. I hear some groaning over here. Some people can't handle one. How could you handle 7? Okay, but if you have many wives, then they are all asurais l'shuk. They are all, until gibum takes place, they are all prohibited to marry just anybody else until one of them is miyabim one of them. In other words, until one of the brothers or this brother is miyabim one of them. Then when either yibum or chalitza takes place with one of them, then the others are good to go, back on the market. For the pasuk says in the chalitza process, it says v'yarka lefanov, and she should say kocha yasa leish asher lo yivdes beis achiv. So shall be done to the person. See, we're holding purim time. Kocha yasa leish, but it's quite a little different. Kocha yasa leish asher lo yivne as beis achiv. The house, one house. In other words, one is done, not more. That's what Chazal darshan. And the same thing is if there are many brothers, not many wives, one to the brother. If there are many brothers to the deceased, only one of them have to go through the yibum or chalitza process. So in this particular Mishnah, the Mishnah discusses the woman that he married. She is actually an erva. She is prohibited. An erva is a prohibited relationship to the surviving brother. In particular, we'll discuss and we'll go into the mishpachology. When you learn Masechta Yevamos, you have to become a mishpachologist. This is the nature of this Masechta. If you're a shatchin, you know a good shatchin had to have gone through Masechta Yevamos. You have to have that mindset. Just kidding, but not really. At any rate, over here in the Mishnah, we're talking about a brother married. Let's say you have Reuven and Shimon. Reuven married Shimon's daughter, which is permissible. You're allowed to marry your niece. You can't marry your aunt, but you're allowed to marry your niece. And then Reuven passes away. Obviously, Shimon could not marry his daughter. But not only does he not marry his daughter, the Mishnah is going to discuss that the daughter's co-wives, rival tzaros, right? The rivals are also exempt. Once one of them are exempt, the other ones as well are peturos, are exempt and do not go through this yibum / chalitza process. And the Mishnah will bring 15 cases. There are actually 6 more, but 15 cases will be brought by the Mishnah. How you have a prohibition to do yibum, and they could just go onto the market. They could marry elsewhere. If there is another brother that she would not be prohibited to, let's say there's Reuven, Shimon, and Levi. If there is a Levi, Reuven passes away, and there's a Levi, then she would do yibum or chalitza with Levi. I hope this isn't confusing yet, because it only gets better. We're going to go into details. And just to point out, the Reuven and Shimon case, even though Reuven was married to several wives, one of them being Shimon's, once Shimon is asur to marry one of them, being of course his daughter, he must not marry any of the other ones. There's called tzaras erva. They're called the tzara, the rivals, the co-wives of erva, and he doesn't have to, and not only he doesn't have to, they are. In other words, it's there's a chiyuv kados over here. Eishes ach shaloi b'makim mitzvah. Basically, it's called the wife of the brother where there's no mitzvah. Once there's no mitzvah, then we fall back to square one, where the brother may not marry his brother's wife. And the Mishnah will also bring a case of tzoras tzora. The co of the co of the co ad infinitum. It continues. If you okay. Now, by the way, this is only a din and yibum. You could have other cases where there's a prohibition to marry one of them, but you are permitted to marry another, not in the case of yibum, but in other cases, one doesn't necessarily disqualify others, but in the case of yibum, it does. Okay, so those are the introductory points that I feel is beneficial to know before we actually begin. Okay, and now we begin.
Thank you very much.
But just give me, I just want to have a time.
It's at 5:30.
Yeah. Okay, now. So Chamesh Esrei Noshim Poitros Tzorei Sehem. There are 15 women, 15 cases that if in their case their husbands pass on, childless, then Poitros Tzorei Sehen, they would exempt their co-wives, like we mentioned before, Vitzorei Tzorei Sehen, or their co-wives mina chalitza or mina yibum, either from having chalitza or yibum. Chalitza or yibum. And again, over here he says chalitza before yibum, like we mentioned before. There's a din. There is a abashol and manda amar that says chalitza is preferred, even though the midin toida yibum goes first. But now, if you don't have the proper kavanah for the mitzvah, chalitza should take precedence to yibum, as we mentioned before. So you have 15 cases where they would be exempt and absolved. Min hayibum atzoy fa'olam ad infinitum ve'eluhen. They are them. So let me just go into the into the, we mentioned Tzoris Sehem, the co-wives co. So let's say the example would be, and I asked the Choshev Dr. Stein to show some pictures to help, because I wouldn't be able to juggle the two. It's a little like, with all this technology and books and tangerines and apples and trophies, it gets a little challenging. So
it's very helpful, those pictures. Very helpful.
Well, I have something similar. I mean, I'm down with this. Moshe sarcastically said that it's not that helpful, but he's not the only one. There may be others. Different strokes for different folks. Okay, so Tzoras Erva is the following. Let's say you have Reuven, Shimon, and Levi. You have three brothers. Reuven is married to someone by the name of Rachel, Mazel Tov. Rachel is the daughter of his brother Shimon. He's also married to another woman called Leah, Mazel Tov, Mazel Tov. So now Rachel and Leah are tzoros. Rachel and Leah, the two of them, are called tzoros. They are rivals. They're co-wives. Huh?
They call him
tzoros. Litzroid aleh b'chayaho. It's based on a pasuk. We'll get to it soon. And then you have a third brother. You have Levi. Levi is out of the picture, meaning he's married to Miriam. Miriam is not Levi's married to Miriam. Just one wife. Reuven is married to Rachel and Leah. Levi's married to Miriam. Rachel, don't forget, is Reuven's brother's daughter, Shimon's daughter. What happens if Reuven passes away? So technically, Rachel and Leah they fall to be into Yibum. Who would do the Yibum? Well, normally Reuven's brothers, Shimon and Levi. Problem is, Shimon cannot be Miyabim, his daughter Rachel, but not only his daughter Rachel, but we said before, Tzoras Erva, his daughter's rival, his daughter's Tzara, meaning Leah, he also cannot marry. So therefore, we push it over to Levi. Levi can marry any one of them. So it's either his niece, Rachel, or the other one, Leah. He could marry whichever one he wants. So let's say Levi passes away. So he ends up marrying, let's say, Leah. And Levi passes away. So now Leah and Miriam are technically, they fall to Yibum, to Shimon, the surviving brother. The problem is, here's where Tzoras Erva comes in. Shimon cannot be Miyabim, not Leah, because she is in the past rival of his daughter Rachel. Nor can he marry Miriam, because now Miriam is a Tzoras of his daughter. She is the rival of Leah, who was the rival of Rachel. Get it? Got it? Good. That's Tzara. So further into this mishpachology. So here, ve'eluhein, bitoy uvas bitoy. Okay, his daughter or his daughter's daughter. Uvas benoi, or his son's daughter. In other words, like this: if a person is married to the brother's daughter's daughter, or to the brother's son's daughter, and he passes on without children, so obviously, she falls to Yibum, to her, in other words, her husband's brother, which means, her mother's father, or her father's father. But that's a no-no. That's a no-no. Now, Rashi points out that bas benoyu, bas bitoy, means a daughter's daughter or a daughter's son out of wedlock. Why out of wedlock? Because the Mishnah proceeds to say bas ishtoy bas beno, his wife's son. I mean his wife's daughter, or the daughter of her son. Ubaz bita, and the daughter of her daughter, which means that would be the regular marriage, or even her child from a prior marriage, but that's a regular marriage. The first case, says Rashi, would be discussing children out of wedlock. And then you have bas ishtoi, uvas beno, uvas bito. If a person is married to the daughter of his brother's wife, whether it's also the daughter of his brother, or whether it's it was born. So he dies without children. So now there has to be Yibum, his brothers. But the problem is, being that she is the daughter of his wife, and there's erva there, she is exempt, but she also exempts and absolves her rivals.
I thought you said you can marry your niece or your niece.
But not if it's your daughter's daughter. Not if it. No, it was
your daughter. You said your son's wife's. What you just say now is not acceptable.
the brother's child's child. So now you're marrying was married to you. Yeah, but then he dies, so you have to take over. The brother takes over, but it's your child's child.
But you're allowed to marry your child's child.
No.
You said your
You're
brother.
not going to marry your grandchild.
No. You said your brother's
Granddaughter, yeah.
Who's the case we're discussing right now?
The surviving brother whose grandchild just became widowed by his brother. Okay, bekitzer, the bas bitoy or bas benoi, if it's the daughter of his daughter, in other words, if she E for effort. Bas ishtoi, the daughter of his wife, ubas beno, ubas bito, the daughter of her son, or the daughter of her daughter, which is also, if they are left as widows, he may not marry them as his wife's grandchildren, as his grandchildren. The Torah says, the Torah of Vayikra says, Ervas isha ubita loy sigala. Right, the erva wife of a woman and her daughter, you should not reveal. As Bas Beno, the daughter of her son, Bez Bas Bita, the daughter of her daughter, Loy Sikach Legalis Ervosa. You may not marry, basically. So over here we're talking about any daughter or granddaughter of his wife, whether it was through him, whether it was a common child, him and his wife, or whether his wife came into the marriage with that child. And the grandchild subsequently is from a prior marriage. It's a prohibition. It's osur, erva. Now we continue. It gets even more colorful. Chamoisoi, his mother-in-law. Ve'im chamoisoi, and his mother-in-law's mother. Ve'im chomiv, and his father-in-law's mother. Right? Chamoisoi. Over here, we're talking about, how could there even be such a case? Like, where does that happen? So let's say you have Avram and Sarah. They have a daughter, Rivka. Okay? So basically, this mother-in-law, we're talking about that she either was widowed or divorced. And then she gets married to one of this person's, to his brother, to Reuven's brother, to Shimon. Okay? So Reuven's mother-in-law just became his sister-in-law as well. Rivka's mother.
No, but this sounds like
It's not his mother-in-law. His brother married his brother's mother-in-law.
It sounds like Chabad families where people get married, all of a sudden now everybody becomes.
Not quite. I haven't seen this one yet, but I'm willing to listen. So over here, we're talking about that, let's say a person's mother-in-law, let's say was widowed or divorced, and afterwards she gets married to one of his brothers. So you have Reuven, whose mother-in-law Sarah gets married to his brother Shimon. And they died childless. Even if she had children, obviously she had a child beforehand, Reuven is married to her daughter. So it's not about her. If in this marriage there were no children, Shimon had no children, so Shimon's brothers have a chiyuv of yibum. The problem is, let's say, even if, the problem is, obviously, Reuven cannot marry his mother-in-law. And being that he cannot marry his mother-in-law, he doesn't marry all of the other wives that Shimon may have been married to as well, because they're all tzaris.
Rabbi, even once she passes, his wife passes away, she still remains his mother-in-law?
Even if his wife, yes.
So then how does he marry her?
No, it's not his wife who passes away. We're talking about Shimon, his brother. His brother married his mother-in-law. His brother, you have Reuven and Shimon.
Married Reuven's mother-in-law.
Correct. Shimon married Reuven's mother-in-law.
Uh-huh.
I know it's a little challenging. Bear with me. Some of us have a little, things in front of us to help us over here, to help us just remain focused, because each case is different. Each case is different. Or at least other names.
You can use this for the test.
Rabbi Bentlik would always read the Ksuba. He would be the standard one to read the Ksuba. The Rosh Hashiva would read the Ksuba on the Chuppah. So someone told him, by now you probably know the Ksuba by heart. He says, no, new names every time. So over here, where either where we have new names or not, but certainly the case scenario is obviously different. Otherwise, it wouldn't be 15 different cases that the Mishnah mentions. So that's chamoisai or aim chamoisai, or the mother's mother, the aim chamiv, or the father's mother, the father-in-law's mother. Excuse me. Then you have achoisai me'imai. Achoisai me'imai, a sister from his mother's side. Ooh, over here we're talking about the sister of the Yavam, only from his mother. So let's you have Reuven and Shimon, okay? Reuven. So over here you have like this: a person who has a child, Reuven, from a prior marriage. He marries a woman that has a daughter from a prior marriage. Okay? So let's call the child from the prior marriage, number one, is called Reuven. The child of the mother's prior marriage is called Sarah. And they commonly have a child, Shimon. So again, the father has a son from a prior marriage, Reuven. The mother has a daughter from a prior marriage, Sarah. And they jointly have a son, Shimon, which means that Reuven and Shimon are brothers only from the father. They're half brothers. And Sarah and Shimon are brother and sister only from the mother. Half brother and sister. But technically, Reuven, and not halachically, Reuven and Sarah are not related at all, are not connected at all. They are children of prior marriages who share no one, not a father, not a mother. So therefore, they could get married. So what happens if they in fact did? He said, oh, technically we can get married. As a matter of fact, let's go for it. And they did. Reuven marries Sarah. And they pass away, he passes away childless. So now his wife Sarah hypothetically would fall into Yibum with Shimon, Reuven's brother from the father. Ki yeshu achim yachtav. We said it in the introduction. The brothers have to be brothers from the father. They have to share a Yerusha, achim. Yeshu achim yachtav. So over here, Reuven and Shimon are brothers from the father. The problem is Sarah is his sister from the mother. So she obviously is patur from Yibum, but not only herself, she also exempts and absolves her co-wives, the Taurus. Obviously, the Isur of marrying your sister is both from the father or from the mother, as it says, Ervas achoischa, bas ovicha, oy bas imecha, the daughter of your father or the daughter of your mother, loy sigal ervasan. Over here, we're talking about me'imoy because the sister of his father could not get married to the brother of the father. There's no mitzvah of yibum, only by brothers of the father. So over here, the sister of the father could never fall into yibum. That's why we're going into the other case scenario, but obviously she can't. Therefore, she doesn't, and her co-wives are absolved as well. Next case, that's achoisoi me'imoy, and then va'achois imoy, his mother's sister. Huh?
Stepbrothers, stepsisters, those are mutar, because they're not from.
If they don't share parents, correct. Well, probably Reuven and Sarah could be called loosely step brother and sister because they don't, but that's not a halachic status. Yeah? Okay. Just wanted to make sure you woke up already.
There's no term for that.
What?
There's no term for that.
Okay. And then you have, Turis means that they exempt, and once they are exempt, there is no din of yibum. They're actually not supposed to. The chi of kares. The chi of kares remains. Nothing. If there's no chiyuv, if there's no obligation, then nothing is done, and they could just marry anybody in the market.
All these people, these the same people who are generally known as Arab, or there are others who are not in this calculation?
Yeah, there are others not who are not in this calculation also. Over here we're talking about in terms of yibum. Yeah, in terms of yibum. As a matter of fact, the limitations of Torah would only be by yibum. In other situations, that's not brothers, wives situation. Even though maybe you may not marry one of them, you could marry others if it's not Yibum related. We're not going to get into that. It's so now we get into the next case. Achois Imoy. Achois Imoy is the sister of the mother of the Yavam. She was married to his brother on his father's side from another mother. And now his brother dies. So his wife is his aunt, his mother's sister. And obviously, this Yibum does not take place, not only for her, but she also absolves and exempts her co-wives. For instance, Yaakov marries two women, Rachel and Chana. Okay? And you have two sons, Reuven from Rachel and Shimon from Chana. So Reuven, the son of Rachel, could marry Chana's sister, because she's not, the sister of his mother. She's not the sister of his mother, but she is the sister of Shimon's mother, which means Reuven, who is married to his mother's sister, his brother's mother's sister from his father's side, and therefore, if Reuven passes away without children, so she falls to Shimon as for Yibum, but she's Petura from marrying him, because she is, in fact, his mother's sister. And the pasuk says, "Ervas achois imcha lo segale." Okay, your mother's sister you could not marry. Okay, so clear. Should I go over the case again, or we're good to go? Okay. So you have Rachel and Yaakov. They both had a common son, Reuven. Okay. Then Yaakov and you have Yaakov married to two women, Rachel and Chana. Two women. Yaakov is before Cherim Derebein Gershom, no problem. Or he's like Yemenites, those who still marry more than one woman. They didn't accept Cherim Derebein Gershom. So you have Yaakov married to Rachel and Chana. Okay, so Yaakov had a child with Rachel by the name of Reuven. Yaakov had a child with his second wife, Chana, by the name of Shimon. Okay, Chana had a sister by the name of Zlata. Okay, if Reuven passes away, Reuven was married to Zlata. Reuven was married to Zlata. There's no issue with that. However, Reuven dies childless, and now Shimon normally would take over his brother's childless brother's wife. But in this case, being that it's his mother's sister, it's his aunt, that's a problem. And therefore, not only does he not do Yibum with his aunt, he doesn't do Yibum with any of the other women involved in this particular marriage. And then there is Va'achois Ishtoi. This is more or less straightforward. His wife's sister. Okay, his wife's sister. In this case, it means if two brothers are married to two sisters, which is a possibility. Okay, and one of them pass on childless, then the wife normally would fall for Yibum. However, in this case, a wife's sister is prohibited. So not only is she prohibited, but it also exempts all of the other co-wives with her. Because it says, V'isha el achoisa loy sikach. Over there in Chumash Vayikra, it says, V'isha el achoisa loy sikach. You should not take a woman and her sister. In addition, Ve'eshes achiv me'imoy, if a person has a son from a prior marriage, and he marries a woman that she also has a son from a prior marriage. And then they have jointly a son, Shimon. And Shimon, which is from the second marriage, has two brothers, Reuven from his father's side, and Levi from his mother's side. Reuven and Levi are not related. They don't share common parents, not a common father, not a common mother. But Shimon is related to both of them. So what happens if, let's say, Levi either divorces his wife Sarah, or he dies? Sarah could technically marry Reuven. There's no issue. Sarah could technically marry Reuven because they weren't related. There's no relation. Because Reuven and Levi were not related. They did not share any common parents at all. Yeah? Yes? So far. But once she marries Reuven, she becomes also to Shimon. Because Reuven and Shimon share the same mother. Same father, you're right. Share the same father. Reuven and Shimon share the same father. Levi and Shimon shared the same mother. Reuven and Shimon share the same father. So in this case, we have a problem of Isur Eishes Ach. And it makes no difference if it's a brother from the father or a brother from the mother. And therefore, there's a problem. So once you can't marry Sarah, once Shimon cannot marry Sarah, Shimon cannot marry Sarah's co-wives either. That's Eishes Achiv Me'imoy from the mother's side. And then you have case number 14, the Eishes Achiv Shaloi Haya Ba'olamoy, a wife of a brother that was married to him, okay, a brother of the father's side. That's the case that you have to have from the father's side. However, the problem is, like we mentioned earlier, Reuven and Shimon. Reuven passed away before Shimon was born. They did not coexist. They did not live at the same time period. Reuven passes away before Shimon is born. So that's not Achim ki yeshvu Achim Yachtov, and therefore, okay, so therefore, being that you have one of those brothers, and now she becomes a Yevama to one of the other brothers that was in existence, and after after Shimon passed, after Shimon was born, this second brother who she was meyabim to passes away. Shimon, this newcomer, does not have to take over, does not have to be meyabim her. Why is that? Because they never coexisted. Okay. So again, the Mishnah is talking about such a case. A person, Reuven, dies without children, and he has a brother, Shimon. After Reuven dies, there's another brother, Levi. Okay? We're going to change the names to make it more simple. Reuven, Shimon, and Levi. Reuven has a brother, Shimon. When he dies, Shimon is in existence. After he dies, there's another brother, Levi, that's born. So the wife of Reuven becomes a Yevama for Shimon. They both coexisted, not a problem. But not Levi. Levi cannot do it because he was not, he was only born after Reuven. So what happens? Shimon is Meyabim, the wife of Reuven, and he also has another wife. And then Shimon dies, also childless. And both of his wives now fall to Levi to be Meyabim. Right? In this case, there is a prohibition for Levi to be Meyabim. Why? Because number one, he's a brother from the father's side, but nevertheless, being that it wasn't Kiyeshu Achim Yachtov, they didn't coexist. Therefore, Reuven was never in the world, even though it's Shimon's wives and they did coexist. But Reuven's wife was when Reuven was married to his wife, they were not coexisting with Levi, and therefore, being that Reuven's wife does not fall to Levi for Yibum, Shimon's wife doesn't either. That's the pshat. The co-wives exempt one another. And then finally,
Otherwise, when a baby gets born,
the kalosai. Huh?
in that case, like if baby was born, the baby, they go, oh, that's my husband.
Not. And then the kalosai, we're talking about the wife of his son after he becomes widowed, or she was widowed or divorced. Now she was his son's kala. She was widowed or divorced, and then she marries his brother. So now, once she's usher to him, you're not allowed to marry your daughter-in-law, right? Once she's usher to him, even if she ends up marrying his brother, which is not a problem, in the event that his brother passes away childless, he may not marry her, being that she was the kala, the daughter-in-law. In other words, married to his son at one point, and therefore that would absolve and exempt her and everyone else, all of the tzaris and tzaris saying.
5:45. 6:17.
Okay, okay. So now the kulon, we have to go a little quicker over here now. Yeah.
No questions, Dr. Stein.
The kulon. Now, all of the 15 that we mentioned before, imesu, if they pass away in their husband's lifetime, all of it, we're talking about the 15 women. Oy shemeenu, oy meenu, or mian is generally speaking a ketana, cannot marry anybody. She's a ketana. The father, however, has a right to marry her off to someone. He has that right. Now, in the event that the father passes away, technically speaking, no one has a right to marry her off. However, the Chachamim enacted that her brothers or her mother could marry her off. Why? That she shouldn't be hefker. She should be protected. She shouldn't be free for all. She should be taken care of, married to someone and taken care of. Otherwise, at this young age and state, she could be vulnerable. So to protect her from that, they could marry her off to someone. However, there were misakin also that if she does miyun means refusal. If she says they could, in other words, as long as she is still a katana, she could come before Bezdin and she say, no, I don't want my husband. I don't want it. That's called miyun. And this miyun, not only does it undo her current marriage, it undoes the marriage retroactively. Limafreya.
So this wasn't all just to keep the money in the family.
Huh?
This wasn't all just to keep the money in the family.
Okay, fine. This is end of life legal matters. I will reserve for your share.
It's an annulment of the marriage.
Yes. It's considered as if she was never mikudeshes. In retrospect. Not like a get. A get means you were married and divorced. This means it never happened.
Annulment in English is they were never married.
So over here, in the Mishnah, it's discussing that one of the Aroyas in the Mishnah was married to the brother who passed away when she was a Yesoima, when she was orphaned, and she was a Ketana, she was a minor, and then she did this act of mi'un. She refused. She said, I don't want him. So being that when the brother passed away, she already was not considered an erva. She was not married anymore. In this case, her rival would be permissible because there is no erva. It was nullified retroactively, and therefore there is no issue. Oisha nimtzu islandess, or or they were divorced by then. Oisha nimtzu islandess, or if one of them, in other words, the one who is, let's say, a forbidden erva, if she ended up being discovered to be an islandess. Islandess comes from the word ayil, a male ram. In other words, she is not befitting to be childbearing. She does not have the qualifications of being childbearing. She doesn't have the simonim, and she doesn't have the ability to have what women have, and in the marriage, and therefore her marriage is nullified retroactively as well. In other words, she got married in a young age, and only later on was it discovered that she's an islandess. The marriage is nullified retroactively, because we assume that had the husband known, he certainly would not have gotten to this into this marriage. So I guess this is the lemon law version, known as islandess, right?
Only for that reason? Come on.
Yeah.
I think we all have the mekach toys aspect.
No. It has to be a valid mekach toys. Islandess in this case is a common mekach toys. Oh, had I known that her nose was a half inch longer than it is, I wouldn't have married her. That's. But over here we're talking about an islandess, which is a clear mekach toys. Yeah, there are other situations that but over here, in other words, there has to be a situation like an islandess where there's a very, very clear and obvious mekach toys.
But if he did know, then in that case,
Where he did know? Okay. No, but over here, how could you know? She married and she was too young to have those simonim or the lack thereof. It only develops later.
I had the impression that she
Signs.
have like kids or anything.
No. Well, that would be one of the signs. Her voice is still thick, no breasts, things of that nature. Certain simonim indicating
That prevents her from having
islandess.
kids.
That, yeah, it's hand in hand. Huh? Not sure. At any rate, okay, so then Oishnim to islandess, right? So they say in Mutaris, then their co-wives, their rivals would be permissible. Why? Because in these cases, had there not been a brother married when he, when he passed away to this particular woman who is an erva, the yavam, and in this case, in retrospect, he's not married to them, which means when he passed away, there is no issue. So the other wives are not tzoras erva, are not the co-wives or the rivals of an erva, because the marriage is nullified, and therefore the pturos tzorisein and tzoris erva does not apply. However, you cannot apply this to his mother-in-law or the mother-in-law's mother, or the father-in-law's mother. If they became, in other words, why don't we say uvekulan? If the Mishnah says uvekulan, all of them, but obviously all of them save these two cases. In other words, the situation when you have the mother-in-law, the mother-in-law's mother, or the father-in-law's mother, obviously you cannot say they were found to be discovered to be islandess. Islandess means you cannot bear children. By definition, once you're a mother-in-law or a grandmother-in-law, you basically did have children, at least one. Nor can you say that they went through this mi'un process as a minor before she became bas mitzvah. She came to Bezdin and she said, I don't want this marriage. Obviously, it's not applicable. Okay, so now the Mishnah goes into, what time is it? I think we have to speed through this Mishnah, huh?
Yeah, like 5, 6.
Okay, so let's try to just, this Mishnah is going to mention all of the cases that we went to a little in depth or in detail. So you should have it on your file already. You should have it programmed and saved. So Ketzad, in other words, how could we apply those 15 women and the prohibitions? Ketzad poitros tzadei saying, how can they exempt their rivals? So, for instance, hoisa bitoy, if a person's daughter, oy achas mikol ha'aroyos ha'elu, or one of the other above mentioned erva, nesua la'ochiv, married to his brother, veloy isha acheres, and he also had another wife, vames, and his brother died childless, which means that the daughter of the Yavam and her co-wives are basically set. They're noifeles lefon of lehibum. Basically, they are set up to be married by him. Now, the problem is, obviously is not an option. So too, her rivals, her co-wives are also two. Huh? Feedback. It's bad enough to hear me once. People have to hear me twice. It's torture. First, what happens if his daughter's co-wife went and married another brother of his, and he also has another wife, Vames, and this other second brother also dies childless, just like his daughter's co-wife is exempt because he cannot marry her, so her co-wives also are exempt. Kach, so too in a similar vein, the tzara of the tzara is also, like you said before, afilu hein mea, even ad infinitum. Ketzad, how? If they died or they divorced or whatever it is, how could we find that their tzaris would be permissible? If his daughter or one of the other prohibited relations were married to his brother, and he has another wife, and Mesa Bitoy Oilis Gorsha, but his daughter ends up dying or divorcing, and then his brother dies, childless. So here, the co-wives are permissible because his daughter's out of the picture by the time his brother dies. If his daughter's out of the picture by the time his brother dies, then it makes it permissible for him to marry the co-wives because they're not co-wives anymore. And the chol hayechoyle lemoin, and if any of the aroyos have the ability of refusing, of doing mi'un, of doing this mi'un process when she's a ktano. In other words, for the brother of the deceased, when she was married to him, but she didn't. So here in this case, she didn't refuse, so she was married. But her marriage is not a marriage minatoira. Her marriage is a different marriage. If you recall, I said before that if she's a minor, midrabana, rabbinically, she has the ability to be married off by her brothers or her mother. So that marriage, being that it's only rabbinic, we don't encourage yibum, but we do encourage chalitza. So midaraisa, it's not a wife, and therefore she could not absolve her co-wives completely from chalitza and yibum. Nevertheless, she does prohibit them because she, at the end, she didn't refuse. And when her husband passed away, she was a tzara, and she's considered married with the Rabbanon. Therefore, to resolve it and to let everyone else go and get married and have a good life, she would have to go through the chalitza process. Have a splendid, most wonderful, fabulous day.
Don't go anywhere. Don't go anywhere. We have there's some gifts for you, sir.
Who?
You. Okay, first of all, everybody knows that Rabbi Marlowe famously really got Teacher of the Year award for teaching Gemara at Hillel. Okay, but he never got Substitute Teacher of the Year award, and so now he does. So 5:30 Warriors Daf Yomi, Rebbe's #1 man, Shliach Rob Dayan, YY Marlowe, is hereby recognized by 5:30 Warriors Daf Yomi Shir for rising to the occasion, absolutely crushing it as a substitute Maggid Shir teacher.
How did you know all this?
Well deserved. This is Rough Kodesh. Substitute Teacher of the Year Award from Sextus. I put more Yevamos. Okay, so I messed it up. So I have to change that.
Okay,
You
you
know,
probably have more
Now you have to write another one with more eulogies.
then, because this also technically is your first debut as a 530 Warrior, you get your 530 Warrior picture. It makes you much younger. You get your
Talking about someone who's before bar mitzvah.
your traditional beverage you get from Rav Papa's brewery.
Asparagus?
So you have to live in the Gemara. It says exactly
Oh,
what it-
sugrapsi.
and your biblical alarm clock to wake the dawn.
Whoa.
That's the koyach.
There's two people who are being discussed.
Could I come again?
Yeah, actually, we need teachers for the next 2 days.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we do actually.
Do you give out jaguars or just horns?
There's two people we're discussing in this session. There's
Jaguars have ones.
there is
So that's why I said it.
if one of the multiple wives is an Araba,
Could I shut it? Yeah.